Hello everybody, I'm Miss Lisa and welcome back to another session of Youth Arts Summer Camp. Normally we have Youth Arts Summer Camp at the MAC, but this year we've gone virtual and I hope you've enjoyed our program. Today I'm going to be showing you how to do two pieces of artwork. We started discussing how we can make art about feelings last week when we were talking about the color red. And today I'm going to show you how to do two different paintings in an abstract manner. We're going to be talking about this painting here, which is a piece about sadness and joy. And then we're going to be talking about this piece here. I'm going to show you how to make a painting that starts with happiness and then gets a little bit sad, but ends up happy again. So these are an additional two pieces of artwork where we can use abstract art to help us talk about our feelings. Sometimes it's hard to talk about feelings because you have to think, first of all, what am I feeling? You have to think about it, and then you have to figure out how you can paint or draw that feeling. And this is something that abstract art helps us with because we're not concentrating on drawing a thing like a vase of flowers or something in reality. We're not thinking about how to draw a landscape that we're looking at, for example, or a stack of books, or anything else that you can look at and then draw and paint. We're instead talking about how to use color in lines and shapes to convey something that we want to express. So abstract art is a great way to give us a means of self-expression. And it's very important to have a means of self-expression, especially when there's so much going on in the world. Okay, you might be afraid with this pandemic. You might be concerned about violence. You might be saddened by injustice. All of these things we get build up inside us, and it's good to be able to have a way of thinking about those feelings and then being able to get them out on paper. We can then talk about those feelings, we can discuss them with others, we can show other people our artwork and explain it to them. So this way of working in an abstract manner with visual arts gives us an opportunity to share our feelings with others. So let's get started. I'm going to start with this piece here because it's going to need to dry a little bit, so we'll start this piece and then we'll move on to our second piece while this one's drying, and then we'll come back to this piece at the end. So what exactly was I doing? I was starting out thinking happy things. I wanted to think about my favorite shape, a shape that I can see in many different ways around me in nature, in everything I do. I'm talking about a circle. Okay, circles are very simple shapes, but to me they have a lot of significance. A lot of things that I love have circles in them, or they are representative of things that are almost circles. When I'm thinking about this in the context of the artwork that I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be thinking about citrus fruits. I love citrus because of the strong smell. I love the smell of citrus. So let's start with an orange, because that one is actually a sphere, and so we can use a circle to represent that sphere, right? We're going to use a two-dimensional representation of the sphere, and it's going to look like a circle. Now I'm going to be using oil pastels. You can do this with crayons as well, but you'll have to push down very hard, And I'm going to be pushing down hard with my oil pastels as well, because we're going to be doing a resist, an artwork about resist, and we started doing this last week. So I'm going to put on some oil pastel, and I want it to be pretty thick because this oil pastel is going to keep the layer of tempera paint from sticking well. I'm going to be putting tempera paint over my layer of pastel. So if you do not have oil pastels at home, you can use crayon, but push down hard. And this is not going to work with soft pastels. Another name for soft pastels is chalk pastels. If you have chalk pastels, this will not work in the same way, although you can use them to draw your favorite shape in your favorite colors if you like. If you're doing triangles, you don't have to make them orange. But the resist technique that we're going to be doing in this project requires oil pastels or waxy crayons. So I'm going to start out with 3 orange circles, and those are going to represent oranges. I also love lemons. So I'm going to draw some yellow circles too. I know lemons are not entirely round, but if we think about them abstractly, we can certainly represent lemons as yellow circles. And I think I'll put some limes in there too. So I'll have some green circles. And again, I'm pushing down fairly hard. You can see that most of the white paper is covered up when I do this. I think I'll make 3 limes as well. Now, in addition to citrus, I'm going to be thinking about a couple more round fruits, because I also love cherries, and red is such a wonderful color to use. You might remember last week I used an awful lot of red, so I don't have a whole bunch left, but we'll go ahead and make a round circle. And I think I'll make some more round circles. Some more red circles, I mean. Of course, circles are round. If they're not perfectly round, that's all right. And if they overlap a little bit, that's all right too. Maybe I'll put one here. And I think I want to use some purple as well. So maybe, what is a round fruit that is purple? Maybe it will be a plum. Maybe a purple grape. I think it's going to be a plum. So I'm going to make some plums as well. And I'm going to overlap some of these other circles. If you can cover up a lot of the white paper at this stage between your circles or other shapes, as well as when you're coloring in your shapes, you'll get a very interesting result, because we're going to paint over this and then start scraping away after it dries. So if you start with a lot of color on your paper, you'll have more places where the color will show through at the end. So I'm putting quite a lot of color on here. I think I'll do a little bit more red because the red just looks so awesome when you scrape it away. Okay, so here's my happy piece of art. And that does look pretty happy, doesn't it? You can just imagine those oranges and lemons and limes and cherries and plums. And it probably smells really good. It's going to taste really good. And that makes me happy. I'm just going to take this here and knock those extra bits of pastel into the dish. And then I'm going to mix up some tempera paints. So remember last week I had my Crayola white tempera paint, my black tempera paint, and I've got some blue today. And this is what we're going to do with it. I remembered this week to get a little bit bigger brush. I think last week I used a small brush and it took a while. But I'm going to mix up some gray and I'm going to mix up some blue and white together. When I put some white in with the blue, it's going to make the color a little bit lighter blue, but it also makes it opaque because the white color is very opaque and it covers a lot better. If I just use the blue on top of this, you'll be able to see those colors showing through. Not clearly, but you'll be able to tell that there's something going on, and I want to cover that whole thing up. I'm also going to make some gray. I'm going to remember that when I mix gray, the black is a very strong color compared to the white, so I'll need a lot more white and a little bit of gray. And I don't want to mix the whole thing together because if I do, I'm going to get a whole bunch of bluey gray. I want to mix a little bit of blue and white together, and I want to mix some gray with more white and a little bit of black. So let's start with the blue. I'm going to pull some white into that blue, and I'm looking for a medium blue color. And why am I doing blue? Blue is a color that expresses sadness or calmness. So if you're feeling very calm, you might be thinking of blue. If you're feeling sad, you can express that with blue as well. You might hear people saying, I feel blue, it's going to be a blue day. Blue kind of has a connotation of sadness, but it's also the best color if you want to relax. It's a calming color as well. So I've got some blue mixed up. I'm just going to wipe my brush off on paper towels and a little bit of water. And I'm going to mix some gray now. So I'm going to take a little bit of black into the white, a little bit more black. And if you get a little bit of blue mixed in there too, it's okay, no worries. I want sort of a medium gray color. And last week we talked about gray being the color of fear or uncertainty. And we can again think about that today. And I'm just going to start using these two colors here. And I'm going to cover up the happy colors underneath. I'm not rinsing my brush in between because it's all going to be blue and gray. I'm just using all the color in my brush and then going into the different colors. I've got some blue, and I'll use all the color in my brush, and when it runs out, I'll go back into the gray. And that way I don't get too much water in my brush, which will make my paper wet, which will make the painting take a long time to dry. So I'm not going to use water if I can avoid doing that. So all those happy colors are disappearing under this layer of blue and gray. Now this piece of artwork takes on a different feel, doesn't it? I'm not so happy anymore. And I think it's good to remember that when you're not happy, there's still happiness underneath. Okay? The happiness is there and you'll be happy again someday. But it might be covered by gray and a feeling of blueness at the moment. Okay. And we're going to let this piece dry now. I'm going to set it aside so it can dry. I'm going to rinse out my brush. Dry it on the paper towels. We're going to do a second piece of artwork now. And this artwork is about the color blue. We're going to start out with blue this time. So we could say it's maybe a sad piece of artwork, or maybe it's just very calming, because we're going to be using horizontal lines, and horizontal lines have a very calming effect. And we're going to be making those lines with blue crayons. Okay, if you only have one blue crayon, that's fine. We'll use your blue crayon. But I have my box of 64 colors. This used to be a big treat for me when I was a kid. Every now and then, my parents would buy me a box of 64 Crayola crayons. And it was just amazing to me that you could have so many different colors. And I would rearrange them. I was afraid to use them because I loved it when they were brand new and they had nice sharp tips. But I would rearrange them many different ways. I would put all my greens together and all my blues together, or I would make them the color of the rainbow. Oh, I loved these. I finally started using them, and these aren't the same ones, of course, I had when I was a kid, but I just wanted to show you what an amazing thing the 64 Crayola crayons can be. So I have pulled out all the blues. I set them aside earlier, so you can see there's really quite a variation of blues in the 64 pack. And we're going to be using these blues. Now, sometimes when we're sad, our brains kind of get stuck in that sad feeling, and it's hard to get out of that sad feeling. And I think one way you can sort of do something to get out of a sad feeling is if you have something else to think about. And color is something to think about. I think it's amazing that there are so many different kinds of blue in this box of crayons. Now, if you happen to have a lot of blue crayons, let's just think about it. This is Pacific blue. We're going to be making horizontal lines with our blue crayons. And if you have only one blue, that's okay. You can make different horizontal lines with your one blue crayon. And I'm going to be making the lines just a little bit variable. So not just horizontal, but maybe a little bit wider, thinner, and wider again. What do we have here? This is plain blue. This is just blue like the large crayon in my jar. This is just blue. This is Crayola Crayon Blue. This is blue-green. Now, those of you that have had me in class and remember how much I love the color wheel, maybe you painted a color wheel with me, will know that the blue-green is the color between blue and green on the color wheel. And you can kind of see the green in there. You can kind of see it. What have we got here? This is Cerulean. This is one of my favorite colors of blue paint. I usually put Cerulean in the sky somewhere. This one is almost a gray, periwinkle. It's like a bluey gray color. And I'm going to vary some of these lines now. They're going to be pretty much horizontal. They might be going up and down a little bit. What have we got here? Cadet blue. That's also a gray or blue. It's actually closer to gray than the periwinkle. What have we got here? Robin's egg blue. Now, if you've ever seen a robin's egg, you'll know that those are beautiful blue color. Cornflower. This is one color I was never wild about when I was a kid. I wasn't really into cornflower. sky blue. That sounds nice. The green we've used. We have not used turquoise yet. Let's put some turquoise down. Okay, I don't think I've used all of them, but there's a lot here. I think I'll just fill in a little bit here and there with some of these. Mix them up just a little bit. Still horizontal lines. We want a nice, calm piece of art here. Just going to knock off those extra bits. Okay, so here we have a nice collection of horizontal blue lines. And it is very relaxing. If you look at that, it's very relaxing. And what you can do, if you want to take this further, is actually ask yourself, do I know anything that's this color? What color is that? Do I know anything that's this color? Maybe you have a shirt that color. Maybe your favorite ball is blue, just blue, blue, blue. I love this color. I love turquoise. There's probably a lot of things that I have that have the color turquoise in them. Very relaxing. And now what we're going to do, if this was a painting about being calm, okay, we agree that doing this piece of art makes us feel calmer than when we started. But if we're feeling sad, what we're going to do now is we're going to go over it with yellow. Yellow is a happy color. And watch what happens when we add yellow. I'm going to use watercolor paints now because I want the crayon to show through. If I use yellow tempera paint, the tempera paint is thicker and the yellow won't resist as well. So what happens is that I can paint right over the crayon with my yellow watercolor paint. And it starts out sort of sticking to the paint, but then the oil in the crayon resists the water in the paint, and it sort of beads up on top. And I'll show you in just a minute. I'm just going to continue here with the yellow watercolor paint. Do you see how it kind of beads up on top of the crayon? It's sticking to the paper, but not to the crayon. All right, now I'm going to take a tissue and I'm going to gently dab over the places where the crayon is, because I know that the paint is not sticking. It's just sort of pooling on top. So I'll just pull off any yellow that's pooled on top of the blue because I want the blue to show through. I don't want to pull off all the yellow from my paper, so I'm just going to let the yellow dry where there is paper but no crayon. But where there is crayon, I'll just gently dab on top of the crayon so that the extra paint comes off. Okay, let's think about what we've got now. It's quite a happy painting now, isn't it? Yellow is a much happier color, and now it reminds me of a sunrise. And sunrise would be perhaps a good feeling that the day is going to go better, that perhaps tomorrow will be better, or maybe next week, maybe next month. Okay, we won't be stuck in our unhappiness forever. Maybe we can call that one sunrise. Now let's go back to this piece here. This one is drying out, but it's not dry enough. So I'm going to let this dry a little bit longer, maybe half an hour, and I'll come back and record the second part of this video in maybe half an hour. We'll let this dry a little bit. Let yours dry too. I'll see you soon. Hi everyone. So I'm back and this is pretty well dried now. I'm just going to start by dusting off these little extra bits of pastel. Loosen them gently and then put them into a bowl. And then I'm going to start drawing some lines. Now I'm going to use my favorite line, which is a spiral. And a lot of you that have had me for class before know that I love spirals because they remind me of shells, among other things. I just love spirals. So I'm going to be doing spirals now over this piece of artwork, and you'll see what happens. If your favorite line is perhaps a wavy line, you can do yours in wavy lines, or maybe yours favorite line is a bumpy line. You can do a bumpy line. Maybe you love dashed lines, and you can do a dashed line that goes here, maybe here. It's up to you, whichever your favorite line is. If you wanted to, you can now do all sorts of different lines on top. Remember, there's vertical lines and horizontal lines, and diagonal lines and outlines and dashed lines and dotted lines and spirals and zigzag lines, just to name a few. Okay, so I'm going to use spirals, and I'm going to grab my paper clip. This is the same one I used last week. It's kind of misshapen and not very good for putting papers together, but it makes a great tool for scratching off paints. And this is very similar to what we did last week with the color red, when we put the gray on top of our red crayon and pastel. What happens is the paint is not going to stick very well to the areas that have pastel, but it will stick to the area that in between those pastel circles. It'll stick to the paper in between. So I'm going to start by drawing some scratching, some spirals. And I want to tell you at this point that when you use a paper clip or any other tool, if you use it up like this on its tip, you're not going to be able to scratch off as much paint as if you use it sort of sideways. So I'm trying to hold it sideways, and I'm scratching through that paint. It's kind of exciting because I don't know how it's going to turn out. Don't know because I've covered the whole thing with blue and gray. Where my orange is or where my green is, it's all a big surprise. And I love the red. The red is really vibrant. There's some red there. Some of my spirals are starting to overlap. Kind of like that look. If you do this and you're not scratching off any color, if you don't see any color underneath in the areas that you're scratching, it's probably because there's no pastel in those areas. So just move to a different area and see if you can get color coming through. For example, I know that there's no pastel here because I can see there's pastel here and here and here, but there's no pastel here. So when I try to scrape this area, none of the paint is going to come up because it's stuck to the paper, and it sticks to the paper very well, but it does not stick well to the pastel. And that's because the oil in the oil pastel will keep the paint from sticking well. And so the areas that have oil pastel, you're able to scrape the paint off. You get some really cool effects. I don't know if you've done tie-dye before, but tie-dye is one of those art forms where you never know what it's going to look like until you're completely done and you unwrap your t-shirt or whatever it is that you're folding and dyeing. You never ever know until the very end. And it's always beautiful. Now I'm pressing pretty hard. Just to let you know, I'm pressing pretty hard to cut through the paint. So if you feel like you're not able to move the paint off of the pastel, you might want to press just a little bit harder and see if that helps. And also, it's a lot easier to do if you put the pastel down thickly at the beginning. So you saw how bright my colors were because I put the pastel down nice and thick. I pressed down and the color went on very strongly. Okay, I'm just going to gently tap this into the bowl. And now at this point, I'm going to have a look, and I quite like the repeating spiral. If you wanted, you can add maybe shapes or sort of wiggly lines in between, but I quite like it like this. I'm just going to emphasize the tops of the spirals by making little circles. That one I know won't show because it's in the place where there's no pastel. And I think I'll just add a few little yellow flicks with an oil pastel. And I think a little bit of red too, because that red is so vibrant. There's hardly any red left. All right, I think this piece is finished. It's very bright and cheerful now. So we started out with a piece of artwork that was quite happy, wasn't it? Had bright colors and repeating circles, and to me it represented fruit, and I think of the wonderful smell of citrus and the wonderful taste of plums and of citrus. I love citrus. And then we covered up that sort of happy painting with gray and blue, which might represent sadness, uncertainty, and maybe fear. And then after that dried, we scraped through to the happy painting again, and those colors are coming through. So maybe we could call this found happiness or something like that. So we've done found happiness and we've done sunrise. Both paintings that are thinking about our feelings of sadness and joy, and maybe incorporating fear as well. It's a lot of fun to work this way, but it's also important that it gives us a way to express our feelings and the uncertainty of living at this time. And like I said before, if you have feelings where you think you're kind of stuck there and you need to talk to somebody, you can take your artwork. And sometimes it's easier to explain to somebody what you're thinking or feeling by being able to talk about it with a piece of art that you've created. And now that we've talked about ways that you can approach this process, I hope that you find this a rewarding and useful activity. It's also beautiful. Look what we've done today. It makes me happy just to see what we've accomplished here. Again, I hope you've enjoyed this Youth Art Summer Camp. Don't forget to tune in tomorrow because we have Joe and Carson Downs. They are doing a contemporary dance class tomorrow. So they've done 3 Thursdays of ballet, and tomorrow they're bringing you a contemporary dance class to finish off our Youth Arts Summer Camp for this year. Thank you for tuning in. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay creative. Goodbye.